UFOs are real, burgeoning, not going away. This is the coming great deception. It's being talked about. The phenomenon is being talked about in Congress as well as every place else for those who are awake. The church, for the most part, won't even touch the subject. My people perish for lack of knowledge. I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. Join us for part two as we walk through the Dr. Stephen Greer paper, which I have a copy of on my desk. I'll be reading from it. But first, a word from our very trusted sponsors. Let me ask you something. If you built up $100,000 or more in investments, do you really want all of it riding on the stock market? Think about it. Banks, billionaires, even entire countries are loading up on physical gold and silver. Why? Because when markets swing, real assets hold their value. That's why I want to tell you about Noble Gold Investments. They make it simple to own investments-grade gold and silver, the same kind the big players are buying. And you can actually hold it in your hand or put it safely in your retirement account. You've worked hard to build your wealth. Isn't it time you protected it? Noble Gold is family-owned, trusted by thousands, and ranked #1 in gold IRAs 4 years in a row. Their precious metal specialists are standing by to answer your questions and walk you through every step. Simple, safe, easy. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com today. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. It's time to protect what you built. Folks, gold right now is at an all-time high, $34.91. $3,491 as of September 1st, 2025. Peggy and I invested in it a few years ago. I am really glad we did. Once again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com. Tell them you heard it from L.A. Marzulli. Thank you. Just a word for Noble Gold, folks. It's this morning it was up around $3,700. I think there's room for it to grow. Some people are saying it might go to $5,000. Here's the deal. There's always a risk with any type of an investment. Do your homework before you invest, but we did, and I'm really glad we did. A couple of other things. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't. And remember, we do 7 shows a week. Don't wait for YouTube to tell you that there's a new show. There's a new show here on my YouTube channel, 7 days a week. I want to tip my hat to John Adam Hicks, who does all of our editing, and he keeps everything running smoothly. Thank you, Sean C. Greer, our webmaster, our social media director, Rachel Tolson, and of course, Sonda Allison, my editor. And she's the one who does a fantastic job on the monthly news magazine. By the way, if you hit the join button and become a member for a little less than $10 a month, you will get the news magazine free, plus all the content, members-only content, plus 10% off everything in the store. Thank you. We appreciate your patronage. Don't forget, folks, I will be at Prophecy Watchers. I'll be speaking 2 times there. One will be on the Shroud of Turin, Holy Shroud, Holy Fire. This is God's calling card, the greatest event in history, and we have forensic evidence that proves it, in my opinion. And you'll hear about that, the Sidarium of Oviedo, and of course, the Holy Fire. My second presentation, more than likely, is going to be something which I really want to do a film on, and so far I haven't. But I'm going to be telling you what I think is going on. And I had a long discussion with our good friend Mondo Gonzalez last night, and he gave me some pointers. Mondo's is our resident theologian. It's just like, that's a mouthful. But yeah, he's the co-host over at Prophecy Watchers, and I run a lot of different things between Gary Stearman and Mondo. If I'm questioning something, I'll go to Gary and Mondo and get an answer, and sometimes Lee Brainerd. But I digress. So let's get into this. This is Dr. Stephen Greer, okay? And we've already done the first 2 points. This is the third point. Extra-dimensional phenomena, which are phenomena and non-human beings that are from other dimensions that are not extraterrestrial or human. Note, non-human, which is what we're talking about, includes both extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional beings. So now you're into my wheelhouse, because I believe the phenomena is interdimensional. So please know that I stand ready to provide any information, intelligence, and whistleblowers that you may need for your important investigation. We have an extensive briefing document that has been provided to the president. If any member would like a copy, please contact, and here's the address. And what's amazing about this, obviously, this man has funding behind him, and this is the narrative which is being promulgated. It goes to the front of a line. Our narrative, even with 10 DVDs, on the entire UFO phenomenon. Thank you, Gil Zimmerman, if you're watching. 10 DVDs. Gil and I did this. We're the only Christian ministry, and I'm boasting here, but I need to, because if you haven't watched these, you need to watch them and do your homework. You need to read Rungs of Disclosure. This is why we made this. This is the coming great deception. This event changes everything. And we're already, Congress is talking about it. Where's the church? Sleep at the wheel. Okay, let's continue. So this is firsthand UAP whistleblower testimony. Michael Herrera, Marine Corps, October 2009. Witness to man-made UAP Indonesia. On September 30th, 2009, the western coast of Indonesia was struck with a 7.6 magnitude earthquake and caused a lot of devastation to the western area of Sumatra. Padang City was the area we were heading into to help for humanitarian assistance. As U.S. Marines, we were part of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which was attached to the 7th Naval Fleet to do security and maritime operations out in Southeast Asia. This time it happened to be for a humanitarian response. Part of the 7th Fleet was a ship I was aboard, the USS Denver. On September 30th, we were routed to break apart from the 7th Fleet dealing with humanitarian operations in the Philippines, which was hit by a typhoon. When we reached the western part of Indonesia around October 8th, we dropped anchor and had a briefing in the war room on the ship. The briefing was talking about the local population as well as former President Obama's family members being in the area. A SEAL platoon was present on the ship to engage with that operation, and we were responsible for providing security for supply drops to the locals, which included sheltering items, clean water, and food. We were also briefed that local insurgents in the area were trying to take over parts of the city and engage firefights with the police. So this is very detailed, which is really good, because we're going to get to the goods here in a second. We were instructed to be armed with standard issue M16s, along with 6 full magazines. We boarded on a CH-53 and proceeded to head to land. When we landed there, were only 6 of us in total, and we pushed our way into an area that had a sloping ridge about 300 meters out from the landing zone. It was filled with thick vegetation and tall trees. When we approached the ridge, we positioned about 30 meters between each Marine to establish fields of view and fire weapons if needed. We thought it was a strange fact we never received any communication. When I had looked down the slope on the north side, I could see something moving and rotating. At the same time, it was changing colors between a very light matte gray to a very dark matte black. It stood out against the terrain and the setting of the environment. Eventually, we all saw it. Normally, we would call something like this in, but since we didn't have any communications, we were not able to. At that point, we decided to investigate it. We were walking down the slope, and I had an old Panasonic camera with video that I took of the scene as we were heading down. As I was walking down, we were in a tactical column, and once we got within 50 meters of the object, I put my camera in my dump pouch I had. We were spotted by a group of military guys who were wearing black camouflage, black equipment with M4s, and it's very technical here. One guy had a radio but no earpiece. They also had either H&K pistols or SIGs in a drop holster. They contacted us by pointing their weapons, which we could audibly hear the weapon safety lever flipping off from a safe mode. I've heard this story before, but I'll continue. Only 2 of the soldiers were speaking to us. They asked us who we were, what we were doing, said we weren't supposed to be there, and they could kill us. They took our military CAD cards or IDs. They photographed them with a phone, possibly, and then 2 tried to scan them with something that looked like our BATS system, which says biometric logging. As this was going on, I saw 4 up-armored extended cab trucks that were painted matte black and looked like Tundras or F-350s. They had 2 large weapon cases in the truck bed and had a separate trailer that hauled a smaller metal box like a shipping container. It had cylinders on it and in front of it. They were driving onto a platform that was under the craft, and 4 guys would hop out of the truck and began unloading the contents and driving off and disappearing. The soldiers proceeded to take and clear our weapons, dump our magazines on the ground, and search us. We were still watching all this go down. We looked at each other, 3 of the soldiers, had facial hair, spoke in plain English, and had American dialects, which makes me believe these guys were definitely from the United States of America. The craft was rotating in a clockwise motion while changing colors. It had an audible hum to it. How many times have we heard about the audible hum? You know, people that come in close encounters of the third kind when the craft is very close, even the second kind when it's like 150 feet away, 150 yards away, they can still make out that hum, like the sound of a transformer or similar to a guitar amp. It was an octagonal shape with a pyramid at the top of it that was black and has scales that were on the outside of the craft. It covered the whole craft. It had seams and sharp edges, which I suspect it definitely be man-made. Nothing on it was smooth. It had some panels on the vertical edges that were like Vanta black. When the last two trucks finished unloading and drove off, the lower part of the platform rose off the ground to about 10 feet, and the craft lowered to meet it. So it looks like this. This is so. Let's say, let me just use the paper here. Let's say this is the platform. So it goes like this. That's what we're looking at, which is very, really interesting. And the craft lowered to meet it, and it came together into one piece. Like the lower platform was the bottom of the craft. It rose off the ground and little past the trees, while on the corners of the craft it had lights that were changing between blue, red, yellow, and green. It got past the trees and then shot off to our left towards the ocean and around, get this, what I would estimate to be between 3,000 and 4,000 miles per hour from a dead stop. It didn't make any sound like a sonic boom. It didn't disturb the trees like rotor wash would. There were coconut trees that even the coconuts weren't even blown off as it accelerated. Folks, what's happening here, in my opinion, this is back engineered craft, and there's a gravity wave which is pulling it. This is why you can accelerate from nothing to 3,000 to 4,000 miles an hour, because there are no G-forces. You're bending space-time around the craft, and I got that from Bob Lazar. Thank you, Mr. Lazar. Notice the way we always give credit here, but I digress. Let's continue. They were saying how easy it was for us to be lost in the jungle, or even easy to be thrown out of a helicopter. So this is pretty intense. As the craft left, I didn't see any other vehicles or soldiers like the 8 that contacted us. They told us to face the slope we came from and proceeded to load our magazines in our pouches and made our M16s condition 4. Then they slung the weapons onto our backs, but looping the sling over our heads, they were rubbing it hard on our necks while trying to sling the weapon, which cut my skin. They still kept telling us how they could kill us and calling us names and asking each other if they should waste us. So it's pretty intense. Once we got over the hill, they told us to get the F away from here and don't look back. We then ran on foot to the path we took from a landing zone, and a gunnery sergeant was there and asked us why we were back so early. We got chewed out for it. He also asked us why we were all conditioned 4. We waited for the bird to come back and load up to the ship. We then turned our weapons in and stored our gear in our berthing area. We proceeded to go back to the flight deck and was debriefed by a rear admiral. Never seen him before, and it was just odd why he was there at all. Fast forward to a few days later, and we docked in Subic Bay for a few days of liberty. I got to my rack, and my camera was on it, but the SIM card and battery were removed, and it was in my locker, which was secured. The other Marines with me had all their iPhones or all their cell phones missing as well. Shortly after we got back to Camp Hansen, Okinawa, the A duty got a call from our CP, and he instructed us that I had to report there. I ran over and was told to go into an office, which then an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel walked in, and I gave the appropriate greeting. He then told me to keep my mouth shut and slid a paper to me, which was a non-disclosure agreement. Thinking that the event would never surface, here it was in my face. Only thing I could recall was it saying TSSCI on. Also talked about the location which was Padang. I was freaked out, skimmed through it, and signed it. The lieutenant colonel told me that I never saw anything and I'm not to say a word about it, and no one in my chain of command is to know the matter. Anyone in my chain of my command is to know, no matter what the rank. I went back to my barracks and haven't spoken about it for almost 14 years. Let me just stop there. When we did in our film, and we actually show this right here, it's actually I think it's the very first film It's either that or on abductions, but it's in there. Richard Shaw, my late business partner, and I interviewed Robert Salas. And Robert Salas was the commander of the Malmstrom Air Force Base years ago, decades ago, okay? And this very large UFO appeared over the gate. And he was like 60 feet underground in the command center, and he was in charge of 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the UFO shut down the 10, took them right offline, shut off without doing anything. There was nobody that landed. The craft was just hovering, and it was able to turn off and take offline all 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles. So we've heard this before. Salas was told, this is my point, was told to sign a non-disclosure agreement. But he came on the record with us. We broke his story. If he's watching or someone, just thank him for that, because we've used it not only on Watchers, but we've used it in our 10-box DVD set. So that's the end of part 2. I want to keep these sort of short and pithy. I'm not sure how many parts there will be here. But look, the phenomenon is real. People are pressured not to speak of anything. Back in the 90s, if you got too close, you had an accident. I'm not just making that up. You had an accident. And we know that people came down with very, very aggressive forms of cancer, and they were threatened. And the same thing is going on now. There is no protection for the whistleblowers. This is what the UAP hearings were last week. People were standing up and knowing there is no protection. You know, I'm in fear for my life. And I get that, because the powers that be are pushing back against exposing what has been here and in our possession since 1947, the Roswell crash. I just want to reiterate something. 1945, you get the Hiroshima and Nagasaki event, the 2 atom bombs. In 1947, you get the Roswell event. And shameless plug, once again, we have 2 films on Roswell. Thank you, my business partner, Gil Zimmerman. So why Roswell? Because the 519 bombing group, which is the bombing group that dropped those atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, are stationed in Roswell. Jesse Marcel was the patsy. That's why we made the film Exoneration. That's the first film on Roswell. In it, we show a clip of the late Dr. Jesse Marcel Sr., who is out in the debris field and basically saying, without Mac Brazo, the rancher, this is where the craft comes in like this. It comes in and it skips. It hits the ground and flies up and then lands 17 miles away. So it skips and then goes this way. Where it skips, the skip zone, is where we found the piece of metal. It's where Jesse Marcel Sr. was. Thank you, Chuck Zukowski and Frank Kimbler, for taking us there. And we've had this analyzed, and it's a aluminum alloy that fits in between 2 known aluminum alloys, but no one knows what it is. So more testing needs to be done, but as usual, I digress. So it's a skip site, and it's in our film, Exoneration. Jesse Marcel Sr. is back on the debris field and said the material was so thin, like a sheet of aluminum foil, but you couldn't dent it. And when we have deathbed confessions from people, when you crumble it up like a ball and threw it down on the table, it spread out like water. Folks, the phenomenon is real. So you get 45, the bombs drop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 47, you get the Roswell event. 1948, May 14th, 1948, not that long afterwards, right? You get the foundation of the state of Israel. Amos 9, 14 and 15. I will bring back the captives of my people, Israel. Check. That's what happened. They will build the waste cities and inhabit them. Check. They will plant vineyards and drink the wine from them. They will also plant gardens and eat the fruit from them. I will plant them in their land, and never again will they be plucked up out of a land I have given them. Think about this. Israel is God's prophetic time clock. That doesn't mean we give Israel a pass on everything that they do. They are perhaps just as corrupt as elements in our government and other governments. People are people. And it's basically a godless nation is what it is. And they have not yet looked on whom they have pierced and repented of that. They have not repented of killing the Messiah, in my opinion. I realize that's a very charged statement to make, but it's true. But they are God's prophetic time clock. End of story. They are God's chosen people, and he's not done dealing with them, which is what the 7 years of Jacob's trouble is all about. May 14th, 1948. This is when the entire UFO phenomena as we know it takes off from the runway, if I can use that analogy. Crop circles begin. Cattle mutilations. Yes, the things were done like this decades earlier, but not like now. Not like since 1948. The abductions, Betty and Barney Hill, all this starts. All the UAPs, UFO, everything starts from 1948. And here we are decades later. And what's going on? You tell me. What's going on 77 years later? Isn't that interesting, right? From 1948. 77 years later. I was born in 1950. 77 years later, here we are. And what are we looking at? In the halls of Congress, they are talking about the UFO phenomena. Folks, all I can tell you is you can rent all of our 10 films by going to streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. Check out the book, Rungs of Disclosure, rungsofdisclosure.com. It's an interactive website. Do your homework. I can only do so much. I'm here every day, and I'm keeping an eye on things. My hand is on the plow. Don't forget the Prophecy Watchers Conference. You can sign up for that. Sign up for the live streaming and eat all the popcorn you want in the comfort of your own home without ever have to leaving the house. So ever having to leave the house. That's better English. And check it out. I'll be speaking twice. Again, once will be on the Shroud of Turin. The other one will be something I think you'll find very, very interesting. And it has to do with the Giza Plateau and what might lie underneath Giza. Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology, you bet. That's it for today. UFOs are real, burgeoning, not going away. I will be back with part 3 very soon. Thanks for watching.